victory today is mine. That's called a traditional gospel turnaround. And it is done in almost every traditional gospel song. This month, we're looking at the traditional gospel turnaround chords. This one's a little different in that I'm going to teach you it in all 12 keys, right? However, you don't have to go ahead and start knocking out all 12 keys right away. The recommendation I'm going to have for this one is to first learn it in your favorite keys first, right? The keys that you're fairly comfortable in, those are the ones you want to make sure you have all your bag of tricks in, so to speak, right? Which is why I'm going through all 12 keys, because everybody have their own favorite keys. So I recommend you learn it in your favorite key first, or if you're actively playing in church, learn it in the key that your church usually do it in first. And then you can slowly go through and learn it in all 12 keys. What is this gospel turnaround? It's simple. It's a 1-6-2-5 progression, but the way it is done is what makes it sort of unique, right? I'm going to demonstrate it in some of the more popular gospel songs. I'm going to pick 3. Now, there are a lot of traditional, sort of what we call churchy songs. And the reason why I want to teach you this is because almost in all traditional churchy sort of clap hand, foot stamping gospel songs, you're going to find an element of this kind of turnaround. So if you learn it, you're going to be able to tweak it so it works in any song, right? Let's take the first one, Victory is Mine. And I'm going to start in the key of C. So we have a victory is mine, victory is mine, victory today is mine. I told Satan, let me behind, victory today is mine. Right there. See that turnaround right there? That's what we're talking about. Do you struggle with these 3 crucial questions? What to practice, how to practice effectively, and when to move on to the next level? Without clear answers, progress is slow and frustrating. This is why I created pianolessonwithwarren.com, a structured program tailored for gospel pianists, guiding you from beginner to advanced seamlessly. At every step, you'll know exactly what to practice, how to practice it, and when to advance. Join thousands of successful students worldwide who have achieved their musical goals with my proven method. Visit pianolessonwithwarren.com and start your 7-day free trial today. In the end, you see what I did right there, this little walk up? Victory today is mine. That's called a traditional gospel turnaround. And it is done in almost every traditional gospel song. It might not be in its full entirety to what I just played in every song, but there's always going to be an element of that turnaround. So that's what I want to teach you today, that turnaround. So we're in the key of C. The best way to think about it is go to the 4-chord. Now make that 4-chord minor, put it in first inversion. We're just starting with the right hand, so you understand, because part of it is pattern. When you're playing traditional gospel, if you can learn the patterns of the chord, then it makes it a lot easier to replicate in other keys. So even though I'm going to break down the other keys for you, I want you to at least understand the pattern for yourself. So go to the 4-chord of whatever key you're in, make that 4-chord into a minor chord, and then put the chord in first inversion. So we're putting the root of the chord at the top. And all we're going to do is bounce it like that. The left hand is going to walk from the 2 up to the 5. Together we have, see how I'm playing? Ba, da, ba. And so that puts us on this 1 chord in second inversion. Both right hand and the bass have the G. Now from here, let me just shift to the left hand and show you what the bass walk is. So, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-da, ba-da. Let's walk it back a little slower. So we're walking it up to the 5. Then we're going to go chromatic up to the 6. Then we're doing sort of a chromatic down to the 2. Then chromatic up to the 5. Chromatic up to the 1. Now you can copy my fingering that I'm using here, or if you find another fingering that works. The fingering is not so much important here because there are other fingerings that can work. But if you want to copy mine, it's a very comfortable fingering. So again, from the walk up to the 2, right, to the 6, chromatic down to the 2. Now I could have done this, right? So I could do a chromatic descend down to the 2 or a chromatic ascend. Doesn't really matter because in the midst of playing this stuff, I can assure you, I do both. I don't really think about it. The only thing I'm thinking about is that I need to get to the 2 because we're doing a 6, 2, 5, 1. And I'm just approaching that using chromatic tones. So you can use descending chromatic or ascending chromatic. It doesn't matter, right? So chromatic up to the 6, chromatic to the 2, chromatic to the 5, chromatic to the 1. Now, I always do chromatic from the 2, chromatic up, because we want to introduce this F sharp, because really what we're playing there is a 2 major chord, right? So that's why here, I would say you want to make sure you're introducing that chromatic up to the 5 and not that way. Even though it could work, I think it sounds better sticking to the diatonic tone of the chord because we're playing a D major. So chromatic up to the 5. Same thing here, because we're on a 5 chord, I'm doing chromatic up to the C because we're on a G chord right there. So one more time with the bass. Ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. Ba-da, ba-da. So after we get to the 1, then we do a walk up chromatically from the 3 to the 5. 3, 4, sharp 4, 5. And you'll see how everything fits together in context. Let's jump now to the right hand so you see the chords I'm playing there. So again, remember, we go to the 4 chord, make it minor, then put it in first inversion. And then we're doing ba-da, ba-da. Then from here, I'm just playing a G diminish, or just play a diminished chord on that 5. Fully diminished, that is. That's a 7. It's a fully diminished 7. And then you're moving this diminished chord down chromatically. Now we have a F sharp 7, or a G flat 7, whichever you want to call it. Move it down again to F diminished 7. So it's just da, 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 and that takes you back to the 1 chord in first inversion. This is a pattern. It's going to move the same way in each key, which is why it is something I'm going to show you in all 12 key. But you know, once you understand the pattern, you'll realize you don't have to think much about the chord name. I'll give you the chord name once I put the left hand in. But I first want you to understand it from a single hand perspective, that if you can remember the pattern of each hand, then once you put it together and moving it through all 12 keys, you won't have much of a problem because you don't have to think about what you're playing if you can remember the patterns. So again, we're starting from here. So the count would be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right, so from here, just diminish on the 5, diminish descending on the flat 5, diminish on the 4, back to the 1. Now this is what it sounds like together. So if you want to put names to the chord, it's a 2 minor, 7 flat 5, 2 chord as a half diminish, 1 chord in first inversion, 4 chord as a minor, 1 chord as a second inversion, chromatic up. So what we're really playing is the 6 as a dominant 7 flat 9. But it's really easy to just think about it as a diminished chord built on the 5. with a 6 in the bass. So this is why I say it's easier to think about it as pattern. Because when I'm playing, I mean, I've known this pattern for so many years that I know exactly the chords I'm playing. But at first, when I just learned it, I couldn't remember the name of the chords. It was the pattern that kept me going as I was playing in different keys. So pattern is more important. And then you can look at it and name it afterwards. So what we're playing here is a 6, A7 flat 9, right? Or what we call a dominant 7 flat 9. And the reason why we're moving it down chromatically, because it's going to be the same chord. Same thing here, dominant 7 flat 9, D7 flat 9. Same thing here, G7 flat 9, dominant 7 flat 9. And that takes us to our 1. That's the pattern. But now look at the character, you know how I'm playing it. And then we're going to play that chord afterwards. So once we drop on the 1, we're now going to do this little walk up. And the right hand, we're taking the 3 and the 5 of the 1 chord, and we're just moving it down chromatically. Well, kind of chromatically. From here, chromatic, down chromatic, and then drop to the 1 and 3 of the 1 chord. So chromatic, 3 and 5 of the 1 chord, chromatic, chromatic, chromatic. Now you see why I say it's not that important to learn this in all 12 keys yet? I prefer you master this 1 key at a time, right? Especially the keys that you find yourself playing in more often. Because as you can see, it's a very intricate kind of movement, and it requires these specific types of notes, so it sounds the same way, right? So we put it together. Now that's the last chord. This is what we call an altered. So we take a G7 sharp 5 sharp 9. They call it a G augmented 7. You can think of it as G augmented 7 or just a G7 sharp 5. That's a sharp 5 sharp 9. Right? So when you see me doing joy is mine, joy is mine, joy today is mine. I told Satan, let me behind, joy today is mine. Ba ba ba, ba ba ba, ba ba ba, ba ba, ba ba ba, ba 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 ba. That's the turnaround right there. Now you might say, Warren, man, that walking bass sounds good. I'll be creating additional content that focus exclusively on just walk bass, right? For now, I want you to get you into this turnaround pattern because it is part of the backbone of traditional gospel. So let me go through it one more time. Again, to the walk. Now you can do this left hand with octave if you want. If your left hand's quick enough to play octave, you can do that as well, right? I like to do it in single notes because oftentimes I find myself playing this type of gospel. I'm generally walking bass myself, right? Now, if you have a bass player, you can omit all of that. But I always like to assume you don't have a bass player because it's best to learn it that way. If you have a bass player, it makes it a lot easier. If you don't have a bass player, it makes it a lot harder. So it's better to just learn the harder way first so that there's nothing else to learn, right? It's only a subtraction going forward if you have a bass player. So from the 2, and again, when you're practicing this, try to practice it within the character of how it's supposed to sound. So you don't want to sit there and just go like. You see that kind of, you want to practice it in the character. So, right? So in the context, a couple of the traditional gospel songs that I have on the website, they come with backing tracks. So you download those backing tracks and just try to groove with it, right? Once you get the notes, practice it slowly to the backing track. This, you don't need any pedal, so don't use any pedal, and you can play the notes jabby like that. Right? So that's the turnaround gospel chord for traditional gospel. So that was Victory Is Mine. But if you have another song like, say, This Little Light of Mine, which is in the same style, right? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. So you see, in that same different song, exact same chord movements. That's why it's called a turnaround, because that's usually where it happens in these traditional gospel. Take a look at the third song, Jesus on the Main Line, right? Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. There again, on the main line, tell him what you want. Call him up, tell him what you want. So you see, once you learn that pattern once, you're going to be able to knock out like 10 different traditional gospel songs using that. Now, I know there are more things going on within the traditional gospel song, because while they got a lot of similar movements, the chord progression changes at different time, right? And I promise you, those are things we will get into piece by piece. I wanted to start with the traditional turnaround first, because it's one of those things that is going to be central. And I think it's safe to say 80 to 90% of these songs, right? So start with your favorite key, learn it, and then try to implement it right away in a traditional gospel song. That's the only way it's going to become foundational. You got to practice it to an actual song, but do it slowly. Because I know these traditional gospel songs sometimes can be at blazing tempo. We got Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. Call him up, tell him what you want. If you want your body healed, tell him what you want. You don't need to go to that speed yet, because if I'm being honest, when it gets that fast, even I am just like, oh my God, it's like a runaway freight train. Because I don't really always play these songs. The church I attend don't do this kind of music, so I'm not as sharp with it as I used to. So start slowly, get it correctly, and then if you want, you can gradually increase the tempo. All right? So that is the traditional gospel turnaround chords in the key of C. I'm going to go through the other 11 keys and show you it so it's easier, so you don't have to sit there transposing it on your own. All right? So see you in the other keys. I'm going to move through the cycle of fourth. I just think it's an effective way to learn musical concept, moving through the keys in the fourth. So the next key I'm going to show you this in is an F. Stay tuned.